Velda Racehorse here. I'm going to be the facilitator for the tribal elders that are here, and I'll introduce them. Okay, to my right is Blaine Edmo. He's now a tribal elder, and he used to be a former tribal council chairman of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes, and also a tribal water commissioner, a former tribal chief judge, and he was an advocate with the court, tribal advocate with the court. On my left is Frederick Ock. He's a tribal elder, Indian man of prayer, an artist, and a handyman, and a grandpa. And he also was a former tribal council chairman and council member. And his trade was being a carpenter. And he owned his own construction business at one time. And then we had another panel member, but if he shows up, I'll introduce him and give some of his background. And myself, I'm also a tribal elder. I can't believe I have reached the age of 80. And I'm a great-great-grandmother. And I'm the archivist for the tribe. And I've held several roles. I started employment with the Shoshone-Bannock tribes in 1961, when I was paid 75 cents an hour to begin with. That was cool wages back then. But I've held several positions through the years under the tribe. I thought about working under the federal government, but then I thought, well, under the federal government, you're restricted on what you say and what you do. So I decided to totally work for the Shoshone-Bannock tribes, and I've held several positions through the years under the tribe. I won't go through them. But we'll start off with Blaine Edmo, and we're going to talk about environmental concerns and environmental protection areas.
Good morning. I hope everybody's awake. Sometimes you get a little drowsy when you're listening to all these spiels presented by all of this bureaucrats and what have you, so, and all the experts. So pardon me if I offended you by calling you a bureaucrat, but sometimes it's a spade and a spade, right? So anyway, my experience is, I can't believe as well, like Velda says, I'm 72 years old, and I didn't realize that I was going to get that old, so I hadn't planned for it. So like a lot of us, we're kind of wondering where in the hell we're going next. So I guess you just play it day by day and hope for the best, and hope the Creator and the Lord watches over us and guides us. Like we hope that that'll happen with the EPA and our environment. They're supposed to be our protector, and they're supposed to make sure that they enforce these regulations. Although the problem I see in the past, and having served as a tribal leader and having met with a number of federal agencies from time to time and state agencies, it depends upon, basically what it comes down to is politics. Sometimes it's human nature, and sometimes it's bureaucracy. And oftentimes it's not for the best of anyone. So they're all well-meaning, and they'll tell you they're going to do the best for us all. But in the end, it kind of gets lost in the shuffle somewhat. And I know when we have changes in the national politics, it seems like we see shifts in the tribal government as well. Their advocacy sometimes kind of goes from left to right or right to left, but depending upon which way the political winds blow. So it's sometimes it's frustrating, sometimes it makes you angry, and sometimes it leaves you wondering, well, what are we going to do next? And so with our current situation in we're living in, with climate change, global warming, and all of the impacts that it's creating to our earth, it's time that we woke up and smelled the roses. I know I've been doing a lot of reading here lately on the internet about some of the so-called initiatives that's happening in the world in the United States to combat global warming. And a lot of it is just political bunk from what I've read. There's a lot of these so-called regulations that are being created that really aren't going to get us to the point where we're going to really slow down global warming. My advice to all those folks that work with the environment or with the sciences, that they need to be honest with everyone and tell them right out, well, we plan on doing this, but it may not work for us all, and it may not stop this massive catastrophe that we're facing. So, you know, we can all sit and talk about the positives, but we also need to think about all the negatives as well, and need to weigh out what's going to take place in the future. So a lot of what I have to say is based upon my my life, my experiences in growing up here in Idaho. And I believe I'm fortunate to have lived here in the home of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes here in Fort Hall. We have a great country here, and up until the time that, well, honestly, I think we need to wake up and smell the roses as far as our environment. We've got a lot of hazardous piles of waste here on the reservation that'll probably never be cleaned up. And one of the gentlemen mentioned about FMC. FMC is history, but their legacy is going to probably continue for generations to come. A lot of hazardous waste materials that are still on the reservation. And it would be nice if we'd had the total support of the EPA in getting these things cleaned up and removed. And I know they always say that it's not cost effective, but I think if you weigh that with our health here on the reservation and our people's health, it should have been a lot stronger advocacy in getting these hazardous waste sites cleaned up. We currently have another one that's still ongoing at the Simplot plant here in Pocatello. And they continue to leach materials into the groundwater of the Portneuf River, which is on our southern boundary here, and into the groundwater. And we still have that legacy from FMC with all the contamination, not only in the hazardous waste that's been left on top on the surface, but also in the groundwater underneath. And it's just unfortunate that we have to live with this, and that the circumstances we have. Also, one of the other things that we have on the reservation is gay mine, and that the legacy it's created, 40 years of mining phosphate on our reservation lands, and then the poor job that was done in reclamation and cleanup of those sites, a lot of selenium contamination that affects not only the animals but also the humans that are exposed to that. And I know there's a lot of downplay on the impacts of that, but it happened. So we still have to deal with that as well. And I think the gay mine has been closed since about the mid-90s, but we still have open pits up there that have to be either covered up or some remedy needs to be made, so there's the exposure that the water and the air causes for selenium to contaminate more. So there's a lot of challenges here on not only on our homeland but also elsewhere. And in some cases we might be more fortunate than others, but in a lot of cases we might not be less fortunate. So my experiences as growing up here, I was lucky to grow up in a family and a father who taught us all about the outdoors and about subsistence hunting, fishing, and trapping and gathering. So my early years I spent out there in the outdoors and enjoyed hunting, fishing, trapping, and gathering, and being exposed to the the natural environment. So it's it's a great contrast to today where we have so much contamination, but we also have exterior contamination as well from the gold mines in Nevada, from all of the arsenic that's in the air that comes to settle in our country, the mercury. And we're here, we have an issue with, we have a limit on the quantity of fish that we can consume because of that contamination. And in some cases, it's not safe to consume a lot of the fish. But I know that's also downplayed as well, especially by the state of Idaho. And they claim that we're not people that rely upon fish to as a part of our subsistence, which is not true at all. And having seen these things and recognized the issues that have been created by that pollution, it's like I said, sometimes it's disgusting and sometimes it makes you angry, and then you have to try to deal with it in your own way. So it's just a ongoing issue that our people here on the reservation are going to have to deal with. And hopefully that we in our wisdom find ways of working with the government bureaucracy and all these agencies that come here and try to find remedies that are satisfactory. I know from my experiences in dealing with a number of these agencies in the past 20 years or more is also frustrating because of the bureaucracy and the double talk and the promises that sometimes aren't fulfilled. So you have to weed your way through that and try to find the best remedies. And oftentimes it's not the best remedy, but it's something I guess you accept whether you like it or not. So pardon me for being so pessimistic, but I'm also a realist, and I believe that we need to be aware of all these factors, and especially for all the younger people, they need to realize that the challenges that they face in today's world, and with all of the contamination, the global warming, and all of the environmental factors that are created by these man-caused problems. We have no one to blame but ourselves, but we also have a challenge to try to remedy, not just do a token show of trying to clean up or clear up or do something just to satisfy the politicians. We got to have some real action taken, and otherwise we're in an exercise of futility. So again, thank you for listening to me, and thank you for coming to Fort Hall, and I hope you've had a good experience here. So other than that, I think I'll conclude my statement. So thank you.
Nathan Small just arrived, and he's currently the chairman of the Fort Hall Business Council, or governing body for the Shoshone tribes. And I'll give a little bit of background on him. He used to be our first gaming manager when we started gaming on our reservation. And we used to have our, started out with bingo, and it used to be held in our gymnasium. And it evolved to this point of having a casino and whatnot. So he was one of the initial managers that began that process. And he was also a court advocate with our tribal court system. And then through the years, then he ran for council, and he became a member of the council and has held chairmanship for many years. And I'll have him speak next in relation to in his environmental concerns, and he can talk a little bit about himself.
Good afternoon. It seems that we've always been having some kind of issues with pollution. When the FMC project was not project, but when the FMC industry was still in operation, Simplot was still in operation. I believe there was a study done way back in the 80s that we had a concern about all the huge amount of respiratory problems that our people were going through. And a lot of that was pointed towards the towards industry out there, FMC and Simplot, as well as the farming activity that was going on out here. There was just so much dust, so much stuff in the air that a lot of our people were getting respiratory issues, and a lot of people have asthma. A lot of people have other occurring health problems because of that. So, and then we were continuing to make a big issue out of all of that and everything. So my phone, but anyway, so it's been kind of a concern with the tribes for quite some time as to what's been going on out there. And I think some of the issues that when I started getting on the council was the EPA. And, we continuously let them know is that there's supposed to be some type of a trust responsibility to the tribes to ensure that our health and our welfare and our continuing to live here is going to be protected. When the FMC plant closed up and they started burying things, and they had a lot of stuff that are still buried out there, and they have a life of 10,000 years. Well, all what's going on out there is they have these ponds out there that are continuing, that are reactive. Every now and then they'll burp and spit something in the air, and it's down below in the ground, and it's starting to get into the groundwater. So a lot of these things are continuous. We asked for a cleanup. The company wanted to cover it up. EPA said, we'll cover it up. And we said, wait a minute, because they were trying to tell us that there was no technology available to remove all of those contaminants. Those contaminants are going to be reactive for the next 10,000 years. So it was incumbent that we do something about cleaning it up rather than covering it up, which EPA and the industry wanted to do, and what was done. But it's still there. We found out that there is technology out there. We were able to get a hold of Argonne National Lab and kind of tell them about what was going on out here. And they indicated to us that there is technology out there to clean this up. And they came and presented to us. We also presented it to EPA. And of course, we give it to industry, but industry still doesn't want to spend the money to clean it up. Well, at that time, EPA folks, they came from Washington, D.C., and they heard everything. And they stood up and says, we will look into this, and we will make sure that industry cleans this up, because there is technology available to do that. Well, that didn't last too long. When you have a change of administration, everything changes. You have to go back to square one. You have to go back to re-educating. We have to go back and do all of those kinds of things, and it gets frustrating because there is no consistency in what they say. And we have to live with this. We told them this is our permanent home. our permanent home. We want to continue to enjoy the treaty that we have. We shall make no home anyplace else. So we are here. And if industry and EPA doesn't start doing the right things out here, then this is a continuously year after year, administration after administration of continuing to have to live with those contaminants. And you probably already heard that it's contaminating our waters, it was contaminating our air, and it was contaminating our land. I've said this a lot, and I'll continue to say that these are givers of life. Your air, your water, and your land. They provide life. And if life is going to be disrupted by any one of those, then we have a really grave situation going on. It'll continue. So this, I've talked to several different administrations under the EPA, and even gone back to DC and talked with them personally. It doesn't go very far. And a lot of the tribes, including this tribe, will say to EPA and other federal governments that all we are is just a checklist. We talk to them, check them off. There is no plan to make sure that what we have is going to be taken care of. Our mine up there, and I'm pretty sure some of you that went on this tour seen that. That's been sitting there ever since they left. Ever since Blot left, it's been sitting there like that. They made attempts here and there, but a lot of their attempts continue to bring selenium out there. We continue to have these selenium patches. We continue to have selenium in the waters up there. We continue to have selenium in our plants up there. And ranchers are losing cattle up there. We have a few cows die from eating too much of that selenium because of the plants that they have. So all of these hazards we have to live with. All of these types of things that have a detrimental effect to our health and our welfare is still there. We brought up, I believe when Trump was the president, we had a guy come out here, Leon was able to convince the main EPA administrator to come out here and look at what we got here. So he came out here and he looked at everything that we had. And when we took him up to the mine, he says, how long's this been? At that time, it was 20 years. He said, why is it taking so long? He wanted to get something done. And I thought, all right, we got somebody here standing on the edge of this pit, looking at that, saying that something needs to be done out here. Well, as soon as he got back to DC, he got ran away. He ran away or he got run off. I'm not quite sure what it was, but all those good words left with him because the next persons that came up didn't follow up with that. And so we continue to have what we have here today. I've been talking with our current Region 10 EPA people out here. They give me a good feeling, but nothing's being done again. Oh, we got to talk about it. Oh, we got to have these kinds of plans. Oh, we got to have all of these kinds of things. We need money to do these kind of things. And that's kind of frustrating. We brought out one of our congressional people out here, Mike Simpson. We told him that EPA said they need money, so he made he was a part of the appropriations committee, so he made the money available, which was never used, to get this pits reclamated. He also stood at the edge of the pits, and we even were able to take him down into a pit. And he's just like, why is this taking so long? There is solutions. There is a way to get this thing done. But I feel a lot of times EPA's trust responsibility a lot of times isn't to the tribe. It's to industry. Oh, they can't do that. They don't, technology is not there. Bull. We shouldn't have to live like this for the next 10,000 years. And our people and some of the landowners on the at these mine pits that we have, nobody's got use. We can't use that land. So it's invaluable. I know a lot of the tribal members that have land up there used to get some type of compensation, but all of that's come to a stop because their land is useless. They can't use it for grazing anymore. They can't get a lot of the things that they used to enjoy out there. We can't go up there anymore. We can't go get wood. We can't go get plants. We can't go get water. We can't go up there because of those pits. Why should we have to live this way when there is the ability to get these things done? And that's been my frustration for years, sitting on the council. Or sitting at home sometimes and sit and look at things and like, oh my gosh, why? Well, those kind of words don't mean a thing to the people who have the ability to do right. We don't have that trust responsibility from the federal sides of things to get these things done. So as I indicated, it's probably one of the most frustrating parts of me being in leadership and trying to get something done for our people here, to get our land back into what it can be. And it's not going to come back to its original site or its original area, but at least do something. Some of the land that is adjacent to these pits are now sloughing. And they are going into the pits. And guess what? There's trees growing in there. I said, nature's trying to heal itself here. But it's not quite the answer up there. You know, well, we want to see what's in the water, so we'll take 5 years to see what's in the water. We'll take another 5 years to see what's in the plants. And we'll take another 5, 10, 15, 20 years to see if industry will come out here and do what they said they were going to do in the first place. And that's called reclamation. Now we have so goddamn many laws and so many barriers to try and get something done. It's almost crazy. They think this is what we need to do. The reality is it's a barrier. It continues to stop progress. You've been out to our water wheel property, and I think I explained a little bit out there about how that we were fortunate to have that little area blessed to be free of all of the contaminants that are coming through. that river that runs right by it is probably one of the most dirtiest rivers in the state of Idaho. And it's probably one of the shortest rivers in the state of Idaho. Iwan was always saying, you can drink the water up on top, but you can't drink it down here. Because there is so much contamination that is spilled into that river. You got how many different sewer systems from several cities and counties that dump their waste into that river. You got a lot of contaminants coming from industry coming through the ground. Why can't these things be dealt with to a point of where we shouldn't have to live with this type of a contamination for year after year after year, or even for the next 10,000 years? Whitey's going to be a really old man by then, so in 10,000 years. But anyway, that's some of the frustrations that I've had to go through when it comes to this one particular project, this one particular issue, EPA and the contaminants and industry. We have a lot of other things that we are dealing with. Our Fish and Wildlife Department and also our environmental departments are looking at what's going outside the boundaries of our reservation. And it's the same story there. You got mines, you got foreign companies coming in to mine, either for gold or for, can't remember all of the things that they're looking for, but they're allowed to do these things. They say because of the 1872 mining law, they have to. I said, no, you don't. There's been a lot of talk about trying to amend or look at that mining law, and there has been some changes to it. There has been some additions to it, but it certainly hasn't done us any good. In 1872, they had shovels and picks. Shovels and picks. That same law now allows a 20-ton truck, machinery that are in this and that weighs in tons, that can pick up tons of dirt and move it. So that 1872 mining law needs to be seriously looked at, not to allow it. Because industry will always say, oh, we're going to clean it up after we're done. We're going to make sure that the streams aren't going to be contaminated. We're going to make sure that the land around it, our footprint isn't going to be any bigger than our footprint out there. The realities of things that goes way beyond their footprint because of moving it. It gets in the air. It's on the roads. It's in the trucks, continuously spreading contamination. So I don't know what a lot of you people are going through, but we go through a lot when it comes to these kinds of things. We have input into the Forest Services management. Same thing with BLM, Bureau of Reclamation. Anything that is federal, we have input into it. And a lot of times our input doesn't mean a thing, because they're allowed to do it anyway. As I indicated to you guys earlier in the week that we're surrounded by about 17 Superfund sites, all from mining. You'd think they would have learned by now and how to do a proper mining techniques to prevent that from happening. But nothing changes. We continue to live with these things. When they take federal land out to do a mine, that is a diminishment of our treaty rights, of our off-reservation treaty rights. What's going to happen with the animals out there? What's going to happen with the fish out there? What's going to happen to all of the plants out there? And a lot of those plants are medicinal. Those kind of things start to disappear around mining activities. So it is a diminishment of our treaty, and it's somewhat of a diminishment of our culture, our practices, our medicinal plants and stuff like that. They're gone and probably never be able to come back. We're going through what we call a natural resource damage assessment. And they said, how much does that plant cost? How much does that field of trees over there cost? What are the costs of the fish? What are the costs of the animals that are out there? When they ask us something like that, we says, they're invaluable. Money is not going to replace it. Money is not going to bring them back. When we were talking about these things, we mentioned, well, what about land? So I think we're looking at the possibility of getting more land either adjacent to the reservation, on or near, or maybe into some of our treaty areas to continue to protect it. But it still does not bring closure to those mines. The fact that what they need to do to make things right. This lasts forever. It's getting to the point of when I started getting older and older, and I'm in my 70s now, and I always say, God, I hope something happens within my lifetime. I would like to see something positive happen in my lifetime. To know that a part of our ground, that a part of our reservation is going to be brought back. But I'm very skeptical about a lot of the things because of the processes and the barriers that we have to go through. And again, I hear some good things from EPA time to time, and then I've heard some really bad things from EPA. EPA allowed FMC Corporation to not clean up, but to cover it up. We're going to cover it up, so it's not going to be a problem, while covering up all of those contaminants is still a problem. And then they go around the cities of Pocatello and a lot of the cities around here, and they have all of these public hearings. And the first thing that comes out of their mouth is that we're cleaning up. And we're right there behind them telling them, you're not cleaning up, you're covering up. So I think it's about time that EPA quit covering it up and start cleaning it up, because that's what they should be doing. I can talk for the next 10,000 years on this subject, because I think that's how long it's going to take. So I would like to go ahead and leave it at that about my statements here to all of this kind of things. And hopefully somebody does something, somebody who is in power to make things happen out here. Because right now we're powerless. So thank you for listening to me. And thank you for even being here. I'm glad you guys all showed up. And I'm pretty sure you probably heard this from other places where other reservations or other tribes are having similar issues. I went to a big conference one year in Minnesota, I believe it was, and they brought in all of these tribes that had success stories. And I'd like to have a success story here. So you got some power, help us get things accomplished out here. Thank you again.
Thank you, Nathan. I'll talk about myself and my feelings, I guess, in relation to environmental protection or environmental natural resources, leading back to when I was young. I was raised in a 2-room house. We did not have running water. We had an outhouse, and our mode of transportation was a wagon and horses. That was when I was growing up little. And everything was pristine back then on the reservation. And animals were running freely. You'd see pheasants, rabbits, all the good things that we used to eat, that we pride ourselves in eating. And one of the things that we have as a delicacy was our rock checks. And probably hardly any of you have eaten rock check. If yes, it's a tribal delicacy. Along with rabbits. Our rabbits have disappeared on the reservation. We understand some of them were shipped to Japan. And but we don't have any around here anymore. We have deer and elk and moose. People still hunt those items, but with all, like Nathan said, the mining industry has kind of polluted our habitat for the eating of what the animals eat. And some have big blisters on them now, caused by all the pollution, created by mines. And so our people, when they find those kind, they don't consume it, but they use the hide, which is valuable to us as a people. And our people make moccasins out of them and different things like that. But as I was growing up, there was a canal that was right next to us, and the water was clear, just pure, clear. Fish used to be in there and everything. And then the federal government included what they call a canal. It was man-made by the CCC way back when it was installed, and funding was used from the tribe's money to build it. And who profits out of it now is the city of Pocatello and Chubbuck. And then our water has diminished since it's been sent elsewhere, I might say. And we used to do flood irrigation. We have less tribal farmers anymore because of the groundwater that our land is leased to. All these non-Indian farmers lease our land, and they put in chemicals, to put on their crops. Before, they used to fly airplanes over and to spread the chemicals. That created a hazard to us as well back then, and a lot of our animals were dying, different things. And then that water that they used to, the groundwater that they used to pump up, the chemicals that were reverted back into the soil I think our water department has corrected that now and made requirements for farmers to make sure that the chemicals don't go back into the aquifer. You know, they stay on top. But these are ongoing concerns. And like Nathan said, you know, in regard to regulations, we have a treaty, yes. It still has meaning to us, but federal regulations are passed, which diminish those rights a little bit at a time. And a good example I noticed is this Clean Water Act. We had a water agreement with the state of Idaho regarding our water and the winter's doctrine, saying that we were here first, so we have that right, first in time, first in right, because we were here first as a people. So we entered into an agreement with the state of Idaho, and it took years to negotiate that agreement. Now this Clean Water Act come along with new regulations, and the regulations diminish what we had an agreement with the state of Idaho for. Now, the federal government gave power to the state of Idaho to do the regulating, and we have to go through them to get EPA funds. So it's not government to government. You included another government in between us. So does that violate our treaty? You know, because these things happen. New regulations come up. EPA is just one agency, like Nathan said. We have the U.S. Forest Service, we have the Bureau of Land Management, we have Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, we have EPA, we have all these different agencies that we deal with, U.S. Forest Service. Each one of them has their own regulations that we have to follow. And slowly we're backtracking and saying, no, we have a treaty right. You got to do away with that because it violates our treaty with the United States government. You're supposed to be looking out for us, but you're not doing that. So now there's a new term, co-manager. Co-management, meaning we can help the federal government co-manage properties. We'll see how that goes. That's our only way to the foot in the door to get back and have our say besides the regulations. So you employees are federal employees, you know, and it's just one set of regulations that you deal with it specifically as an agency. But think of us, we have to deal with how many different agencies and how many different regulations under the federal government. And then they want to include the state to tell us what to do. And we've been doing that for years. Before, we didn't even know a lot of these regulations. We were never told about them. We just accidentally find out. Maybe somebody attended a conference and it was mentioned, and then word comes back and you find out about it. So all these different things have taken place, and that's where we are today. We're just regulated to death. Then what really irritates me is when we do receive funds. Well, you got to do this. Once you get this money, you got to do this. You got to do it this way. We require you to do this, 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 this. And to me, that's like a mother or father telling you, well, you better do this. Otherwise, you're not going to go to the prom, or you're not going to go to the dance, or I'm not going to let you use a car to go here. You know, we're treated like little kids. It's not government to government. We're being told what to do when we should be telling you what we need, what we want to do with the money. And then once we do get the money, then we have to do reporting. And then once we do get the money, I find out that there's more to it than that. The government wants to know what you're going to use it for. They want more information from you. And it's like you got to turn yourself inside out so they can see the inside of what's going on, you know. To me, we're regulated to death by the federal government. And we shouldn't be. We should be working together to meet a goal that we're happy with as a people. You're here as an employee. We're here as a people, surviving on what we enjoy, our foods, our arts and crafts, whatever, you know, our recreation. What we feel is recreation is going fishing, hunting, you know, different things like that. We don't go to football games. We don't go to basketball games. We don't, you know, go to the Super Bowl or anything like that. We'd rather go to the homey places where we feel comfortable within nature. That's all we want. We've come this far. All our ancestors have come a long ways. And that's what we want for our children, to enjoy what we have now. How many of you have ever prayed for a tree to hope that, you know, that it survives and that it can breathe and have that circulation to give back to you? How many of you have prayed for stuff that you received? Like if you went to get a willow or you went to get a plant for food, you know, that you're digging your roots. How many have prayed and gave thanks for having received that? How many of you have prayed for food on your table? You know, that's our nature. That's the way we live. We pray for everything we have and give thanks. That's the way we are. That's why these things know what they're there for. Long time ago, when the world started, the rocks, the water, the plants, the flowers, the trees, us human beings, what we call ourselves, Nimminit. That's what we call ourselves, human beings, we spoke the language. We all talked everything. They all talked to one another until our maker decided, well, you know, too many of you are talking. So they just left that to us as a human being to talk for the rest of the water, the plants, the trees, the flowers, the insects, the animals. And if you hear stories, usually it's about the coyote, the wily coyote. And these are things that have happened because in our language, when you tell it in your language, it's the truth. It's not lies. Our people told us oral history, and it was always the truth. And it was passed down because it's what they seen back then, what they lived through. Now, the reason our people, they still pray for all these things. And I talked to people, some of our people, they said they've prayed at a rock, a specific rock, a sacred rock. And they said they couldn't believe it, but it was crying because our people prayed for that rock. They couldn't believe it, but this was just recently. And another time, another lady told me the same thing. She said it talked to her. She was praying, you know, for the overall nature. And she passed a rock. It was kind of a tall rock. And she passed it. And it said, Nides, meaning me too. And she turned around and looked, and there was nobody around, but it was the rock that happened to say that somehow. And so she did. She started a little fire and had her little cedar bag and She prayed for that rock. And it also cried. She couldn't believe it, but it did. These things happen. So we need to pray for nature. Your regulations can't cover that. We all need to pray for nature wherever you are. Even if you're by yourself, get out there and pray. Pray for everything that's there because it's there for a purpose for us as a people. Thank you. Our time is up.
Had me tearing up there a little bit, Zelda. Thank you. Thank you all so much for sharing. I just have to say, wow, it's always a blessing to hear from the perspective of our elders, and boy, we owe you a lot. So thank you so much for all the work that you've done to get us to where we're at. I would like to invite everyone that's here in the room to please go have some lunch. We'll have our next speaker coming on in just a few minutes, but please enjoy some food, and yeah, we'll be right back in programming in just a few minutes.